Ancient Tribal Food for Health via Roger at hemphearts.com hereby challenges Jody Wilson-Raybould, former Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, to understand how convergences of wealthy elites and political elites, in the food and health industries especially, deliberately ruin the health of Aboriginals and poorer Canadians, and then profit from the debilitation. We offer solutions that require only the removal of most enforcement provisions from the government regulations that protect these malignant convergences. If misguided government employees were the advisors that they used to be, rather than the enforcers that they are now, they could occasionally be helpful. We are proud of you, Jody Wilson-Raybould. When Prime Minister Justin Trudeau claimed publicly that your continued position in cabinet should actually speak for itself, he was in effect trying to collect and transfix you as a supporter of wealthy SNC-Lavalin elites, as well as Canadian political elites. Quite apart from the obvious corruption, many Canadians are quite disgusted that the Canadian government elites have too often acted as pimps for SNC-Lavalin elites and then protected SNC-Lavalin elites when their overseas projects proceeded inappropriately. More importantly, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is the leader of a government that has further weaponized the Canadian Food Inspection Agency in its now obviously deliberate efforts to prevent Aboriginals and poorer Canadians from consuming sufficient real protein food for health. Real protein, whether from plants or animals, must contain all of the same amino acids in similar ratio as mother's milk, the substance that is obviously best suited to all mammals for building and maintaining body tissues. We at Ancient Tribal Foods for Health have been warning the Canadian Food Inspection Agency for almost 2 decades that its behavior in deliberately obscuring the importance of real protein food and its focus on deliberately ensuring that real protein foods in Canada are 3 to 5 times more costly than the same protein foods in the US constitutes a form of nutritional genocide of Aboriginal and poorer Canadians. The high cost of real protein foods, established via government marketing boards by certain wealthy elites and political elites, is obviously the primary reason that so many Aboriginal and poorer Canadians choose immensely more cereals, breads, potatoes, pasta, and rice. This starch-grain diet inevitably leads to hardened arteries, high blood pressure, and cardiovascular issues requiring medications and services supplied very imperfectly by other wealthy elites and political elites. This starch-grain diet usually leads to obesity, diabetes, amputations, blindness, and other complications of diabetes requiring medications and services also supplied very imperfectly by even more wealthy elites and political elites. Our colleagues invented Hemp Hearts Protein Flakes as a perfect, real protein food, a substitute for the animal protein foods that are inaccessible in quantity to Aboriginals and poorer Canadians because of regulation imposed by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. The response of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to the detailed customer health surveys that support the health claims for Hemp Hearts Protein Flakes has been to order our colleagues to shut down their website. The response of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to our message about the importance of real protein foods has been many devious attempts to shut us down entirely. Although American real protein poultry products are 1/5 as costly as similar products in Canada, and although American real protein dairy products are 1/3 as costly as similar products in Canada, all real protein food products in the US are nevertheless expensive compared to their prices when Canadian farm children supplied much of Canada with milk and eggs from cows and chickens that were scavengers, cruising farmyards, coolies, and unproductive places where they converted fallen seeds, insects, grass, worms, and dead leaves into virtually free, health-giving, real protein foods. In those days, there was virtually no obesity, virtually no type 2 diabetes, and virtually no early onset cardiovascular disease. Now that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency ensures that all poultry products and all dairy products consumed in Canada originate with producers who buy or lease, or less commonly inherit, the right to charge astronomical prices for real protein foods. And now that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency insists that chickens and milk cows are normally kept in confinement and supplied with commercial feeds that are produced using lands and other resources that could be used to grow food for humans, there is no possibility for most Aboriginals and poorer Canadians to obtain sufficient real protein foods for health unless they learn somehow about Hemp Hearts Protein Flakes. It is admirable that Maxime Bernier has the guts to challenge some of the wealthy elites and some of the political elites who benefit from the high cost of real protein food products. But he does not yet have any power. If he is elected, how much globally harmonized regulation will he be able to reverse? We should support him, but Aboriginals and poorer Canadians must learn to depend less and less on others for food and health. Aboriginals and poorer Canadians must learn how to produce and process sufficient real protein foods for ourselves without any regulation or supervision. We must learn how to avoid regulation that prevents us from setting up and utilizing arrangements of 4 or more modified ocean containers with internal courtyards as barn residence factory compounds where we can live comfortably and produce and process foods and other products. We must certainly learn how to use simple, indestructible windmills with locally made dual carbon batteries to store energy for heat, light, and food processing, as well as for simple machines for water treatment and waste treatment. We need to focus on becoming independent. We need to gut the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and the Canadian Standards Association and all other government agencies of the enforcement provisions that have converted very imperfect social servants into powerful enforcers for wealthy elites and political elites who limit our competitive production potential and then kill us slowly with inappropriate food while selling us ineffective medicines and useless treatments. Our enemies are legion. Those who grow millions of acres of starch grains, those who supply the sprays and fertilizers and fuels and machinery and irrigation and technology necessary for the producers of starch grains, those who make immense fortunes processing these starch grains into a spectrum of imperfect foods that do not satisfy very long, causing us to eat again too soon, those who supply recipes and labels and packaging and transportation relative to these very imperfect starch grain foods, those who pretend to assist those who become obese from starch grain diets without reversing their obesity, those who pretend to assist those who become diabetic from starch grain diets without reversing their diabetes, those who pretend to assist those who develop hardened arteries and cardiovascular disease from starch grain diets without putting elasticity back into their arteries, those who manufacture and market medications that only alleviate the symptoms of myriad health issues caused by starch grain diets, those who manufacture and market supplements that only pretend to assist those who have become debilitated by starch grain diets. All of the above are participants in an immense food and health fraud that is promoted and protected by a convergence of wealthy elites and political elites determined to use junk science and false narratives to impose their disastrous ideas and programs on us. We of Ancient Tribal Foods for Health offer Jody Wilson-Raybould, former Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, sufficient free Hemp Hearts Protein Flakes for experimentation to prove that the statement, "we are mammals," is the only fact that is relevant about food and health. Our bodies develop during infancy, requiring nothing more than the ingredients in mother's milk. A. Real protein for making soft body tissue. B. Calcium for making bones. And C. Fats for energy. In other eras, after babies quit nursing, they, like their parents, consumed almost nothing but buffalo, or fish, or sea creatures, or dairy and domesticated animals, all real protein foods. Our colleagues learned from lab tests that each tiny 2-ounce serving of our Hemp Hearts Protein Flakes contains all of the amino acids, equal to 2 quarts of mother's milk. Our colleagues also learned from tens of thousands of customers that those who consume at least 2 servings of Hemp Hearts Protein Flakes per day can restore elasticity to hardened arteries to achieve childlike blood pressures. These meals, with a little dairy for calcium, are only about 250 calories each, so it is easy to achieve any preferred weight. These meals contain virtually no sugars or starches, so it is easy to reverse diabetes, even putting circulation back into diabetic feet and eyes and brains. Because no human will consume more than 6 ounces of Hemp Hearts Protein Flakes per day, only a small part of the land now used for human food and animal feeds would be required to supply the entire population of the world with enough real protein to guarantee amazing health and spectacular achievements. Excess arable land could be used for dietary novelties, especially fruit, vegetables, as well as other real protein foods. We need to quit pimping for wealthy elites and political elites who are determined to stop resource development near us because they're already rich or because they're already developing resources in other countries and do not want business competition here. This planet is an ever-changing lighter crust supporting life, floating on a heavier cauldron of molten material, all of it consisting of chemical compounds made up of only about 100 elements. Men can make messes that they can also clean up. But men do not in any elemental sense make anything. They only rearrange what is already here. Water can become hydrogen for raising airships and oxygen for torches that cut steel. But after the hydrogen and oxygen are released, they become water again. Bays could easily be farmed by individuals to produce more fish than we need for dietary novelties. So the oceans would recover their previous productivity. Chickens and cows could again become scavengers, guided again by children to consume items that humans are incapable of digesting. Increasing portions of starch grain land could be used instead for hemp and other real protein foods. Those who pretend to be scientists so they can create false narratives in support of elitist agendas should be convicted of a new crime called lying, and then forced to earn their living by herding and milking goats. Cow farts are obviously irrelevant. At one time there were so many buffalo that every hillside, every coulee bank, every river valley on the prairies still bears the scars of their corrugated trails as oceans of them moved in vast migrations. In fact, Aboriginal lands could become free zones where we could manufacture as if we were located outside of Canada, where we could lease property and facilities to businesses that also prefer to function as though they were located outside of Canada. Virtually every warehouse in Germany is such a free zone now, not technically part of Germany. Raw materials from all over the world are received and processed and packaged in these German warehouse free zones and then shipped to other countries. Free ports, or free zones, all over the world are staffed by employees who function outside of their surrounding countries, not subject to the very limiting labor standards and other standards imposed by wealthy elites and political elites. The Germans receive and process products from every country in the world and then ship to every country in the world, but they only technically import the product that remains in Europe. Germany and other exporting countries boom because those who are industrious in those countries have discovered methods to avoid virtually all of the regulation that wealthy elites and political elites impose on others. We, at Ancient Tribal Foods for Health, have learned to treasure the videos of certain internet heroes who have exposed the self-serving behaviors of convergences of wealthy elites and political elites in promoting continuous war as they attempt to reduce the population of the world. But without the influence and control of these idiot elites, the earth would be able to support many times as many humans as are alive now with ease. Unless we discard the red and green religions of these idiot elites, we will soon glow in the dark as they attempt to remake the planet into their own national park.